22 minutes before my husband was supposed to close on a $640,000 house for the woman he had been sleeping with, a real estate attorney called me at a hotel in Nashville and asked a question that turned my entire marriage inside out. Ava, I need you to answer this very carefully. Did you give Grant power of attorney to borrow against your home? I was standing in the hallway outside a conference room with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and my laptop bag over my shoulder. And for a second I thought she had the wrong Ava Morgan. I was 28 years old. I worked as a commercial insurance account manager in Charlotte, and I had never given anyone power of attorney over anything. No, I said. I'm in Tennessee. I haven't signed any loan documents. The woman on the phone went quiet. Her name was Naomi Price, and she was the attorney handling a home equity closing on the house Grant and I had owned together for 4 years. Then do not call your husband yet, she said. I'm stopping this closing, and you need to call your bank's fraud department as soon as we hang up. The air in that hotel hallway seemed to disappear. Naomi explained that Grant had presented a notarized limited power of attorney supposedly signed by me 6 days earlier, giving him authority to sign loan documents on my behalf. The lender was prepared to release $240,000 against the equity in our house that afternoon. The only reason Naomi had called was because one of the phone numbers on the verification sheet did not match the number attached to our original deed. Ava, are you still there? She asked. Yes, I said, but I barely recognized my own voice. I walked back into my hotel room, locked the door, and sat at the desk. I did not call Grant. I called the bank. Then I logged into every account I could reach. Our household checking looked normal. The emergency savings account did not. $74,000 had been sitting there when I left Charlotte 2 days earlier. The balance was $16,212. A wire for $58,000 had gone out the previous afternoon to something called Blue Ridge Escrow Services. I stared at the screen until the words stopped looking like English. Grant and I had been married for 4 years. He was 32. A senior mortgage loan officer, the kind of man who could explain an adjustable rate mortgage to a nervous couple in a way that made them feel like he had personally invented financial security. He knew exactly how lenders worked, exactly which documents mattered, exactly which signatures were supposed to stop a transaction cold. More important, he knew why that money mattered to me. My father had died when I was 22. He had not been rich, but he had left me a small condo with no mortgage. I sold it before Grant and I bought our house, and almost every dollar of my father's equity went into the down payment. I had never called that money mine after we married, but I had never forgotten where it came from either. I pulled up our shared family calendar because I wanted to see when Grant had supposedly scheduled this mysterious loan closing. Instead, I found an appointment that had auto-synced from his iPad. Hawthorne closing 3 p.m. There was a PDF attached. The first page was a purchase contract for a new construction house in a development outside Charlotte. The buyers were Grant Morgan and Brooke Ellis. I knew Brooke's name. She was a real estate agent Grant had worked with on half a dozen deals. I had met her twice at office events. She had hugged me once and told me Grant talked about me all the time. The second page showed the purchase price, $640,000. The third showed a $58,000 earnest and design deposit already paid. If you have ever been the wife who keeps the family calendar, the passwords, the insurance cards, the dentist appointments, the quiet little pieces that make a shared life function, then you know how strange it feels when the same ordinary systems suddenly become evidence against the person sleeping next to you. I sat there with Grant's purchase contract on one screen and our gutted savings account on the other, and understood something before anyone said the word affair. My husband had not made a mistake. He had built a schedule, the fake power of attorney, the money moved while I was out of town, the afternoon closing, the house with another woman's name on it. This had been timed around my trip. I called my bank back and froze outbound transfers. I changed the passwords on every account that belonged only to me, froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, downloaded 5 years of statements to an encrypted drive, and emailed copies of Naomi's message and the purchase contract to a new address Grant did not know existed. Then I called a family law attorney named Serena Vaughn, whose number a coworker had once given me after her own divorce. Serena listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You did the most important thing already. You preserved the documents before confronting him. Now get on the next flight home, but do not sign anything. Do not leave the house permanently, and do not agree to move money because he tells you it will fix this. I'll meet you tomorrow morning." Only after I hung up did I allow myself to look at the photograph attached to the house listing. Grant and Brooke were standing on the front porch of a model home, smiling beside a sales agent, his arm low around her waist. That was the moment I stopped wondering whether there was another explanation. I reached Charlotte after midnight and slept 3 hours in an airport hotel because Serena had told me not to walk into my house exhausted and alone. At 8 the next morning, we met in her office. By 10, she had copies of the fake power of attorney, the stopped home equity transaction, the $58,000 wire, and the Hawthorne purchase contract. Naomi had provided a written statement confirming that I denied signing the document and that the closing had been halted before any loan proceeds were released. Serena filed an emergency request asking the court to prevent either of us from selling, refinancing, or transferring major marital assets until the dispute could be sorted out. Then she looked at me across her desk and said, "Now you can go home." Grant's SUV was in the driveway when I pulled up. He was in the kitchen wearing gym shorts and an old college t-shirt, eating cereal as if the last 24 hours had not happened. He looked at me, then at my suitcase, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. "You came back early." I set my keys on the counter. Naomi Price called me. His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He did not ask who Naomi was. That told me everything. "Ava, before you go crazy, let me explain." "I'm not going crazy." I kept my voice level. "I want to know why you forged a power of attorney with my name on it." He put the spoon down and leaned back. "I didn't forge anything." "Then you won't mind telling me when I signed it." He stood up, irritation replacing surprise. "You sign things constantly. Insurance forms, tax papers, closing documents. You probably forgot. I was in Atlanta the day the notary says I signed it. I have hotel records, badge scans, and a picture of me standing on a stage at a client conference at the exact time your document says I was in Charlotte." For the first time, Grant's face changed. Not guilt, anger. "So you called the lender?" "The attorney called me." "You stopped the closing?" "Yes." He shoved his cereal bowl into the sink hard enough to crack it against the stainless steel. "Do you have any idea what you just cost me?" I almost laughed. "I cost you?" That was when he stopped pretending. He paced to the end of the island and turned around. "Brooke and I have been together for 8 months. I was going to tell you after this weekend. I wanted everything settled first so there wouldn't be drama. Settled means taking $58,000 from our savings and borrowing $240,000 against our house. I was going to make you whole." "With what?" He ran a hand through his hair. "We were going to sell this place after the separation paperwork was signed. You'd get your share, I'd get mine. The equity line was temporary. Temporary debt against a house you plan to sell after using the money to buy another house with your girlfriend." "Brooke is not some girlfriend." He said it with offended dignity, which somehow made the whole thing uglier. "We're building a life." I stared at him. "And I was what?" He hesitated, and that half-second pause hurt more than the affair itself. "You and I stopped being a marriage a long time ago, Ava. You work late. You travel. Everything with you is schedules and renewals and risk and whether we're saving enough. Brooke actually wants a family. She wants a life that isn't planned 6 months in advance." I felt the old version of me rising, the one who would have defended every late night and every sacrifice. But I remembered Serena's voice telling me not to litigate my marriage in the kitchen. "Who notarized the power of attorney?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Jason Pike." I knew Jason. He was another loan officer and one of Grant's golf friends. "Did Jason watch me sign it?" "Jason did his job." That wasn't my question. Grant stepped closer. "You need to stop acting like you're some victim in a crime show. You called one attorney and one bank and now you think you've caught the century's biggest conspiracy. We were getting divorced. Money was going to be divided anyway. Then you should have waited for the divorce. I picked up my suitcase. I'm staying in the guest room. Serena Vaughn represents me now. Anything involving money, the house, or separation goes through her. His face hardened at Serena's name. You hired a lawyer before talking to me? You bought a house with another woman before talking to me. I walked upstairs and closed the guest room door. 10 minutes later, my phone started filling with messages. Grant told me I was being vindictive. He said Brooke's deposit could be lost because of me. He said I was destroying his career by accusing him of fraud. Then he sent the message that ended any doubt about how the document had been created. You calling the bank does not erase a valid POA just because you don't remember signing it. Jason notarized it properly and he'll say so. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Serena. 5 minutes later, Grant's mother, Carol, called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. On the third try, I answered. Ava, I don't know what's going on between you and Grant, but he says you froze money and canceled a house closing. He forged my name to borrow against our home. There was a long silence. Then Carol sighed. I'm sure there's more to it than that. There isn't. Honey, marriages end. It happens. Grant should have handled things better, but ruining his job and humiliating Brooke isn't going to save your marriage. I'm not trying to save it. Then be reasonable. Let everyone move on. That sentence stayed with me. Let everyone move on. As if the only obstacle between Grant and his new life was my refusal to cooperate with being robbed. Later that afternoon, Carol and Grant's father, Dennis, asked me to meet them at their house on Lake Norman. Serena told me not to go alone, so she came with me. They served coffee in china cups and spoke like we were negotiating a used car. Dennis slid a sheet of paper across the table offering me $40,000 if I agreed to withdraw the fraud complaint with the lender, sign a separation agreement within 48 hours, and clarify that the dispute over the power of attorney was a marital misunderstanding. Serena did not touch the paper. Mr. Morgan, she said, you should have your own attorney review this before you offer my client money to change her statement to a financial institution. Dennis went pale. Carol looked at Grant, who had been sitting beside them in complete silence. That was when I realized his parents did not know the whole story. They had believed the version where I was bitter, emotional, and blocking a clean divorce. Grant had lied to them too. I stood up. I'm not taking your money. I'm not changing my statement. And I'm not arguing about the marriage anymore. Grant finally spoke. You're going to regret turning this into a war. I looked at him and said, You made it a document problem, Grant. Documents don't get tired of arguing. The next major turn came the following evening, when I received a call from a blocked number while I was sitting in Serena's office reviewing bank records. I answered, because by then, every unknown call might have belonged to a lender, investigator, or attorney. Is this Ava? A woman asked. I recognized Brooke's voice immediately. Yes, she exhaled hard. Grant says you're accusing him of stealing your identity. He says you canceled our closing because you want to punish me. Did he tell you I signed off on the equity loan? He said you signed a settlement giving him permission to use his share. There is no settlement. There is no signed separation agreement. The power of attorney he used has my forged signature on it. Brooke said nothing. Serena motioned for me to put the call on speaker, and I did. Brooke's voice changed when she finally spoke again. He told me you were moving to Atlanta. I'm not. He said you already accepted $90,000 to walk away from the house. I didn't. Another silence. Then Brooke whispered, Oh my God. I expected her to hang up. Instead, she asked, Did the $58,000 come from you too? It came from our joint savings account. He told me it was his bonus money. I closed my eyes. Brooke was not innocent. She knew she was sleeping with a married man. She had walked through model homes with my husband while I was still packing his lunches and adding his dentist appointments to our calendar. But there is a difference between an affair and knowingly participating in fraud, and I could hear the moment she understood that Grant had used her as much as he had used me. I have messages, she said. What kind of messages? From Grant. About the loan. About Jason. About you signing. Serena wrote on a legal pad. Ask her to preserve everything, I said. Do not delete anything. Screenshot the full threads with dates and numbers. Back them up, then get your own lawyer before you send anyone anything. Brooke gave a bitter little laugh. You're giving me advice? I'm giving you advice because I want the truth more than I want you scared. 2 hours later, Brooke's attorney contacted Serena. By the next morning, we had copies of messages that made Grant's kitchen denials look ridiculous. In one, he told Brooke, Ava signed the equity docs. Jason notarized. She won't know until after Tennessee. In another, he wrote, once the cash hits, Hawthorne closes Friday. If she fights later, we sell the old house or let the debt eat the equity. Either way, we're out. That line took me apart in a way the affair had not. Grant had known the equity in our house came mostly from my father. He had sat with me on the empty living room floor the day we bought it, and told me my dad would be proud that his little condo had helped us build something bigger. 4 years later, Grant was joking about letting debt eat the equity so he could start over with Brooke. I printed that message and placed it in the folder beside the fake power of attorney. For the first time since Naomi's call, I cried. Not because I wanted Grant back. I cried because I finally understood that the marriage I was mourning was not the marriage he had been living. Then the investigation began moving faster. The lender's fraud unit contacted the State Financial Crimes Division. Naomi gave a sworn account of why she had stopped the closing. Serena sent the bank my travel records proving I could not have signed the notarized document. Grant's employer opened an internal compliance review because the fake documents had been uploaded from an IP address assigned to his branch office. Jason Pike was interviewed about the notarization. He initially insisted I had appeared before him, but security logs from his office building showed he had not even been at the location listed in his notary journal that afternoon. Serena told me not to celebrate anything yet. These cases are built slowly, she said. Your job is not to punish him. Your job is to keep telling the truth in the same order every time someone asks. So that was what I did. I kept working. I went back to my office. I slept in the guest room for 3 more weeks while the court sorted temporary possession of the house. Grant moved into a furnished apartment after Serena obtained an order preventing either of us from harassing the other or disposing of property. He told co-workers I was having a breakdown. He told his parents the lender had overreacted. He posted photos from restaurants with captions about choosing peace. Brooke continued seeing him publicly for another 2 weeks, which hurt more than I expected, until her attorney apparently convinced her that staying near an active fraud investigation was a terrible idea. Then she disappeared from his social media overnight. What Grant did not know was that Brooke had already provided investigators with the original message threads, the purchase contract, and an email in which Grant explained exactly how the equity loan was supposed to fund their down payment. He kept behaving as though confidence could substitute for facts. That became his biggest mistake. 6 weeks after Naomi Price stopped the closing, Carol sent me a photograph of a thick, cream-colored invitation. Grant's company was holding its annual producer awards at a luxury hotel in uptown Charlotte. He was scheduled to receive the company's top regional sales award, and according to Carol's message, he was still being considered for a branch management promotion. Her text underneath the photograph read, "Whatever happens between you two, I hope you can let him have one night without trying to destroy something he worked for." I showed it to Serena. She stared at the message for a long moment, then handed my phone back. Do not answer. The strange part was that I had already been asked to be at the same hotel that afternoon. Grant's employer had hired outside counsel to review how the forged power of attorney had passed through its systems, and their compliance team wanted one final in-person statement from me before they closed their internal investigation. I arrived at 3 o'clock in a navy suit, carrying nothing except a folder and my driver's license. The interview lasted 50 minutes. They asked whether Grant had ever been authorized to sign on my behalf, whether I knew Jason, whether I had approved the $58,000 wire, and whether I had been promised any repayment before the loan application. I answered each question once. When we finished, the outside attorney thanked me and said, "You're free to go. I should have gone home." Instead, I stepped into the hotel lobby and saw a display board directing guests upstairs to the awards reception. I could hear laughter from the mezzanine. Men in suits and women in cocktail dresses were arriving with name badges and champagne flutes. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, arguing with myself. Then Serena, who had come with me, said, "You don't owe anyone a performance. But if you want to see the ending, we can sit in the lobby and let it come to us." So we did. We ordered coffee from the hotel bar and sat near the windows. 20 minutes later, Grant walked in with his parents. He was wearing the dark blue suit I had bought him for our 3rd anniversary. Carol had on a silver dress. Dennis looked 10 years older than he had at the lake house. Grant saw me almost immediately. His confident smile disappeared. He left his parents and crossed the lobby fast. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "I had a compliance interview." His eyes narrowed. "You came to my company?" "They asked me to." "You just can't stop, can you?" "Grant." I answered questions about documents with my name on them. "You're obsessed." Serena stood up. "Mr. Morgan, you should return to your event." He looked at her, then back at me. "You think this is some big victory? The bank didn't lose $1. The house never closed. You got your money back. Nobody was harmed." That was when a woman in a black blazer stepped off the elevator and approached him. I recognized her from my interview as the company's chief compliance officer. "Grant," she said, "I need you upstairs now, before the program begins." His face tightened. "Can this wait?" "No." She looked at Serena and me, then back at Grant. "Bring your company phone and laptop." The color drained from his face. He went upstairs without another word. Carol crossed the lobby toward me. "What did you do?" she demanded. I stood. I told the truth. "They're taking away everything he worked for because of paperwork." Dennis touched her arm. "Carol." She pulled away. "No, she needs to hear this." Grant made a mistake. Ava decided to ruin his life over it. Serena stepped between us slightly, but I shook my head. "Your son signed my name to borrow $240,000 against a house built with money my father left me. He moved $58,000 to buy another woman a house. He planned to let the debt consume whatever equity I had left. That isn't paperwork." Carol looked at Dennis. For the first time, neither of them had an answer. Upstairs, the awards program started 15 minutes late. We could hear applause through the open mezzanine doors. Then the Master of Ceremonies announced that the evening's Regional Sales Award would be presented to a different loan officer because Grant Morgan was no longer eligible for company recognition. That was all they said. No public accusation, no dramatic speech, just one clean sentence. Yet the effect was immediate. The applause came late and confused. People started looking at each other. 10 minutes later, Grant came down the escalator carrying a cardboard property box containing a framed photograph, a coffee mug, and a couple of books from his office. 2 members of corporate security walked behind him. His phone was no longer in his hand. He saw me and stopped. "You did this!" "No." I stood very still. "You did." Before he could answer, Brooke appeared at the top of the escalator. I had not known she was there. She came down alone, wearing a black dress and carrying a small clutch. Grant stared at her. "Why are you here?" Brooke stopped 3 steps away from him. "My attorney told me investigators might want clarification tonight." His expression changed. "What did you give them?" She looked at him with no affection left in her face. "Everything you sent me." Grant actually staggered backward. "Brooke, you can't be serious. You told me Ava agreed. You told me the money was yours. You told me Jason had done this 100 times. Lower your voice. You lied to both of us." At that moment, 2 plainclothes investigators entered from the revolving doors with a uniformed deputy behind them. They did not storm the ballroom. They did not shout. One of the investigators showed Grant a document and asked him to step into a conference room near the lobby. Grant looked at me once, then at Brooke, then at his parents. Every place he had expected loyalty had gone quiet. "Ava!" he said, and his voice had lost the polished certainty I had heard every day of our marriage. "Please tell them this was a misunderstanding." I thought about the Nashville hallway. I thought about the fake signature, the emptied savings account, the model home photograph, my father's equity, and the message saying the debt could eat whatever I had left. I did not give him a speech. I said, I never signed it. The investigator led him away. 8 months later, Grant stood in federal court and pleaded guilty to bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy related to the forged loan documents. Jason Pike lost his notary commission, lost his job, and accepted a plea that included probation and restitution after admitting he had notarized my signature without me present. Grant's employer terminated him permanently, and the state revoked his mortgage loan license. The judge sentenced Grant to a little over 3 years in prison. The sentence was not as cinematic as the things I had imagined during those sleepless first nights, but by then I understood something I had not understood when Naomi called me. Real consequences are quieter than revenge fantasies. They arrive in signed orders, canceled licenses, locked accounts, court dates, and people who stop answering your calls. Brooke was never charged with the loan fraud because the evidence showed she had been lied to about where the money came from, but she lost the Hawthorne house, returned furniture Grant had purchased with our funds, and moved to Raleigh after her brokerage dropped her for the publicity surrounding the affair. She sent me one message before she left. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm sorry I believed him when believing him was convenient. I never replied, but I did not hate her anymore. Grant had been the one person with the complete map. He had given each of us only the piece of the story that made him look like the hero. Carol and Dennis never apologized in the way I once thought I needed. Dennis sent a handwritten note acknowledging that the $40,000 offer had been wrong. Carol sent nothing. Serena told me that sometimes closure is simply the absence of another argument, and I learned to accept that. The lender canceled the home equity transaction before a dollar was released. Most of the $58,000 deposit was recovered through escrow after the Hawthorne purchase collapsed, and Grant was ordered to reimburse the remaining loss through restitution. I kept our house during the divorce because I could afford it, but 6 months after the decree became final, I sold it anyway. I did not want to spend the next 30 years walking through rooms where I could still see the version of myself who thought silence meant safety. I bought a smaller brick bungalow in Plaza Midwood with a screened porch, a ridiculous yellow front door, and no spare bedroom large enough for anyone to mistake the place for temporary housing. I put the deed in my name alone. I kept working at the insurance firm, and when my regional manager offered me a promotion, I took it without apologizing for how many nights I might have to travel. I started teaching a short financial safety seminar for new employees twice a year, not because I had become suspicious of marriage, but because I had learned how many smart people confuse trust with access. I told them to know where their documents were, know whose name was on the accounts, and never assume that loving someone meant you were insulting them by protecting yourself. A year after Grant's arrest, my younger sister invited me to a backyard cookout. Her neighbor, Luke, spent most of the afternoon arguing with my brother-in-law about whether charcoal tasted better than propane. He was 31, worked as a landscape architect, and knew absolutely nothing about my case until my sister accidentally mentioned it after dessert. He did not ask me for details. He did not tell me I was brave. He did not promise he was different from Grant. He just handed me another lemonade and said, "That sounds like a long year." 2 weeks later, he asked if I wanted to get coffee. I almost said no because saying yes still felt like opening a door I had worked very hard to close. Then I remembered what I had actually learned. Protecting yourself is not the same as shutting everyone out. Trust is not a signature somebody gets to use because you love them. Trust is something two people keep earning when no one is watching. So I said yes. I did not need Luke to rescue me, and I think that was the first reason I liked him. The second was that when I eventually told him the whole story, he listened until I finished and then said, "I'm glad that attorney called you." I smiled because so was I. Grant had believed the phone call ruined his future. For me, it was the first warning bell in years loud enough to make me stop, look at the life I was living, and choose one that actually belonged to me.